My daughter-in-law handed me a cup of coffee. She smiled, not kindly, but like she already knew something I didn't. And right beside her stood my only son, Julian, watching, silent, not stopping her, not saving me. It wasn't the poison that hurt most. It was the way he looked at me like he hoped I wouldn't survive the morning. I stood up and walked out. It wasn't always like this. There was a time Julian used to run barefoot through the orchards at Ashwood arms wide like airplane wings, yelling for me to watch him take off. He used to bring me hand-picked wildflowers with bruised petals and dirt still clinging to the stems. "For you, Mama," he'd say with that toothy grin. I used to believe that kind of love was unbreakable. But something changes when money enters a family like a storm, not all at once, but with creeping wind and hairline cracks. The land beneath Ashwood is rich in rare earth minerals and natural gas. Robert, my late husband, never wanted to touch it. He said the land was our roots, not our ATM. But after his death, those roots got heavy, lonelier, and people began circling. Ashwood is a place you can hear your own breathing. 62 windows, but none of them feel open anymore. I still walk the halls some nights just for the sound of my footsteps. 14 rooms, polished silver tapestries from another time. None of it means anything when you're the only one left making coffee at dawn. I was in my study the day Julian arrived Tuesday morning late spring. The magnolias had just started to bloom, filling the air with a sweetness that didn't match the feeling in my gut. I heard his car before I saw him, a sleek black BMW that purred instead of growled, the kind of sound that used to make me smile. That day, it made me grip the edge of my desk. Julian used to knock. That morning, he walked in like he owned the walls. "Mom," he said, not even pretending to greet me properly. "We need to talk." He dropped into the chair across from mine. No hug, no eye contact, just a tight jaw and hands that wouldn't stop fidgeting. "I need 100,000, he said flatly. Not even a preamble. I blinked. I didn't say no, not yet. I wanted to understand what I was really looking at. Julian had come to me before always with grand ideas and wild optimism. A boutique wellness retreat in Aspen, a revolutionary travel app for high-net-worth millennials, a podcast network for disruptive thinkers, all flops, all financed by me. This time, though, the desperation wasn't even hidden. "What's the venture?" I asked carefully. He launched into a pitch, clearly rehearsed something about a tech platform for luxury branding. But it didn't matter. I wasn't listening to the words. I was watching the way his voice trembled beneath the polish, the way he kept glancing at the door, the way he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Who's your partner?" I asked. He hesitated. Just a breath, but enough. "You don't know him. He's from California." "What's his name?" Another pause. Too long. "Mom, that's not important." That told me everything. I'd spent 25 years as a federal prosecutor. I once got a conviction off a single sentence stuttered by a witness. I know when someone is hiding something. Julian was hiding something, not just a bad investment, something heavier, something that stank of fear. But what chilled me the most was what I saw behind his eyes, calculation, and a strange kind of detachment. 2 days later, he returned this time with Samantha, or Sam as she insisted people call her. She kissed the air beside my cheek and breezed into the kitchen like she'd practiced the route. "Hope you don't mind us dropping by," she said, that magazine smile plastered across her flawless face. "We brought coffee." She handed me a delicate china cup, white porcelain with a gold rim. "My own set." She must have gone into the cabinet. "It's a special blend," she cooed. "Ethiopian beans with Madagascar vanilla. Thought you might like something new." I brought the cup to my nose and froze. It wasn't just coffee, it was sharp, bitter. The smell caught in my throat like broken glass. Almond. My stomach clenched. I know that smell. Not from the kitchen, from autopsy reports. Cyanide. I looked up. Sam was watching me, not with warmth, but with calculation. Julian stood in the doorway, still silent, still scrolling his phone. And suddenly the walls of my own home didn't feel like shelter anymore. They felt like a tomb. I smiled. "This smells lovely," I said softly. "You'll have to show me the shop." When Sam turned her head to speak to Julian, I made the switch. 2 identical mugs, 2 seconds, 1 silent decision. She took a sip from the cup meant for me. 15 minutes later, she was on the floor gasping for air. And Julian. He didn't look shocked. He looked like a man watching a plan go sideways. As the ambulance sirens screamed down the gravel drive and the medics rushed in, I stood frozen in place, a cup still in my hand, steam still rising, knowing with a certainty that hollowed me out. That poison was meant for me. The hospital was cold. Not physically, the thermostat was probably set to 72 degrees, but spiritually. Everything felt clinical, efficient, indifferent. I sat in a hardback chair just outside the emergency wing, hands folded neatly in my lap, while inside doctors worked to save the life of the woman who'd tried to take mine. Julian paced nearby, running a hand through his hair every 30 seconds, like he thought movement could distract from the truth, clinging to his clothes like sweat. His performance was convincing. Almost. The frantic whispers to nurses. The "oh my God, baby, stay with me." The trembling voice on the phone to someone unnamed. But I didn't need a jury to see what I saw. Julian wasn't trying to save her. He was trying to save himself. A young doctor, early 30s, with a clipboard and a purpose, finally emerged. "Vivian Mercer," she asked. I stood. "I'm Dr. Elena Reyes. You were with the patient when symptoms began." "Yes." "Can you describe what happened?" I told her. Calmly, deliberately, that we were having coffee at my estate, that Sam, I never once called her Melissa, brought it, that she poured it, that I took a sip but something smelled off, that I remembered an almond bitterness, and then she collapsed. "You both drank from the same pot?" she asked. I nodded, my voice even. Same pot, same cups. I left out the switch. For now. 15 minutes later, Dr. Reyes returned. Her face was tighter jaw, more set. She looked like someone who didn't enjoy what she had to say, but understood the weight of saying it. "We found traces of cyanide," she said bluntly. This was intentional. The word hit like a gavel in a silent courtroom. Intentional. "We're required to notify authorities," she continued. "This is now a criminal investigation." My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't hitch. But inside, my world shifted. No longer just betrayal, this was war, and the battlefield was about to get very public. Then the curtain around Sam's bed pulled back. She was pale, weak, but her voice rang out like a rehearsed line. "She did it!" she rasped, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Vivian poisoned my coffee. She tried to kill me." I stared at her stunned, not by the accusation I expected that, but by the ease with which she delivered it. No hesitation, no fear. Julian stepped forward, unsure. That's impossible," he said too slowly. "Mom would never." But he added, a word too many. "But she's been off lately." The nurses turned toward me, brows furrowing sympathy, draining like bathwater. In that instant, I saw the narrative beginning to write itself, and I wasn't holding the pen. I was the controlling widow, the lonely matriarch, the unstable, eccentric, rich woman who hated her daughter-in-law and feared losing her son. I wasn't the target anymore. I was the suspect. A detective arrived less than an hour later, mid-40s, crisp suit, wary eyes, the kind of man who asked questions like he already had the answers. "Mrs. Mercer," he said. "I'm Detective James Rowland. You're not under arrest, but I'd like to ask you a few things." They led me into a side room, no windows, a water dispenser, and the corner beige walls that hadn't been painted in at least a decade. It felt like every interrogation room I'd ever sat in as a prosecutor, only now I was on the other side of the table. I told him what I could. I didn't volunteer the cup switch, not yet. I needed to know what cards they were holding before I played my own. Roland asked about my relationship with Sam, about Julian, about the estate. He asked if I had any enemies. I nearly laughed. I used to lock them up for a living. Then he said it. "We did a preliminary search of your home. Found a vial in the guest bathroom, contained cyanide residue, also a handwritten note, dosage information, Sam's name. It appears to match your handwriting. I blinked. I've never seen that note, I said evenly. Never saw the vial either. Are you suggesting someone planted it? I met his eyes. I'm saying I didn't put it there. And still I saw it, the faint narrowing of his eyes, the doubt creeping in. He'd seen enough cases to know when something felt rehearsed. I hadn't rehearsed anything. I was surviving on instinct. Then came the twist. Your son Roland said, glancing at his notes, returned to the property earlier this afternoon. Said he was gathering Samantha's belongings. He was alone inside for 2 hours. A quiet pause stretched between us. Just an observation, he said. But it wasn't just that. It was a breadcrumb, and I followed it. Later, through the thin partition wall, I overheard Julian's voice, smooth, controlled, but just loud enough for me to hear what he wanted heard. My mom's different lately, he said, paranoid. She thinks people are after her money. She even told me she was considering rewriting her will. Each sentence built the new story brick by brick, the aging matriarch cracking under pressure, the fragile widow unraveling with suspicion, the doting son caught between love and concern. When Roland returned, the shift in his energy was palpable. We'll need to examine your phone, he said. Your computer, you're safe. I nodded, expression unreadable. But inside, a lifetime of legacy, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every courtroom battle was being reduced to a whisper campaign. And my own son was the loudest voice in the room. I wasn't just being framed, I was being erased. And that's when I knew it was time to fight, silently, strategically, and without mercy. I drove back to Ashwood in silence, every turn down the winding gravel road, echoing like a verdict. My house, my sanctuary, didn't feel safe anymore. Not because of the press or the police, because the betrayal had already happened within these walls. The poison had already touched my lips, and worse, the person who handed me the cup had once called me Mom. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream. Those emotions are for people still hoping to be understood. I was done with hope. Instead, I picked up the phone and called the one person who had once stood beside me when the truth was all that mattered. David Mallister. He answered, his voice older now, but still carrying the gravitas of a man who'd prosecuted senators and CEOs. It's Vivian, I said. I'm in trouble, and I don't know who I can trust. He was at my door by morning. We didn't waste time on pleasantries. David had always hated small talk. He brought files, a portable scanner, and a mind sharper than the knives in my kitchen. This wasn't a spontaneous act, he said, after I laid it all out. It's a chess move, calculated, timed. And that's cyanide. That's not your average domestic poisoning. That's someone who knew dosage and chemical handling. It's premeditated with intent to destroy, not just kill. He leaned back and looked at me in a way that made the world fall silent. They're trying to erase you, Vivian, legally, financially, reputationally. If they succeed, your will becomes challengeable, your mental fitness becomes questionable, and your foundation dissolved. The estate reverts to Julian. I had rewritten my will 3 months earlier. I hadn't told anyone except my attorney, locked the document in the estate safe, and instructed all assets to go directly to the Mercer Foundation, a nonprofit designed to funnel resources into elder legal aid, animal protection, and education grants. It was my final gift to a world that had given me so much. But Julian must have found out, or more likely, Melissa Duval had. That's when David looked at me and said 4 words that snapped the air like a whip. You need a shark. Ethan Granger arrived that afternoon. He was barely 40 but had already shredded corporate crime syndicates on the East Coast. Calm, observant, with the kind of silence that made powerful men talk too much. Vivian, he said, shaking my hand, they're going to paint you as paranoid, unstable, controlling, and your son's testimony will make it seem true. I nodded. So what do? We get ahead of them. Ethan, David, and I began our own investigation. Quiet, precise, ruthless. David started digging into Julian's finances, old bank statements, loan applications, even dark web whispers through former FBI contacts. What he found turned my stomach. Over $300,000 in debt, spread across 3 states. Creditors that weren't corporations, they were people. People with names like Knox, Redman, and Gilly. People who didn't send overdue notices. They sent bruises. Julian wasn't just failing at business. He was running out of time. That explained the desperation. But not the plan. That's when we turned to Samantha. David had a friend at the bureau, the real bureau, and within 48 hours we had a name. Melissa Duval. She had changed it 6 years ago. Before she married Julian, she had a different husband. Harold Bixby, 67, retired. Wealthy, died suddenly of heart complications, 2 months after updating his will to name her as sole beneficiary. His family had suspected foul play, but the investigation hit a wall. She disappeared shortly after the funeral. 2 aliases later, she met Julian in Los Angeles. They married 6 months later. No prenup, no financial disclosures. She was a black widow wrapped in Chanel, and I had invited her into my kitchen. Ethan didn't blink as he read the reports. She's done this before, but she made a mistake this time. She left you alive. I sat at the dining room table staring out the window at the late spring garden Robert once planted. For a brief moment, I could still see the man he used to be kneeling in the soil, sweat on his collar, whispering to the roots like they were secrets. And I made a decision. I'm not hiding, I said. David raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking I'm thinking? We give them exactly what they want. It was time for a trap. A rumor, a leak, a breadcrumb. Vivian Mercer has evidence, a document, a recording, something that proves everything. We spread it through friends of friends. Subtle. Nothing overt. Just enough to make it feel like a mistake they could still clean up. 48 hours, I said. Make sure they think it's coming out in 48 hours. David nodded grimly. We looped in the FBI. Given Melissa's past and the interstate implications, they agreed. Surveillance was installed, silent cameras along the estate perimeter, motion sensors along the western garden, audio bugs placed in key rooms. I was wired. Then we waited. The hardest part wasn't fear. It was pretending not to feel it. Pretending I was still vulnerable. Pretending I hadn't already handed them the rope they'd use to hang themselves. I walked the halls of Ashwood each night just like I used to. Watered the orchids. Lit the fireplace. Set 2 extra cups on the kitchen table, one for Julian, one for Melissa, and I sat in silence, listening for footsteps, the kind that no longer belonged in this house. The night before they came, the sky over Ashwood was a deep velvet black, no stars, no moonlight, just a heavy stillness that pressed against the windows like breath on glass. I sat in Robert's old chair by the fireplace, the same one where he used to read the financial section and mutter under his breath when the market turned. The flames cracked softly, but I barely noticed them. My thoughts were somewhere else on a pair of porcelain coffee cups, and the child I once rocked to sleep, who now might be coming to finish what the poison didn't. David had warned me, they won't try again in public. If they think you have evidence that could ruin them, they'll come for it. They'll come for you. And they did. It started at 2:13 a.m. The first motion sensor lit up near the East Garden, then another by the old rose trellis. The FBI agent stationed quietly in the nearby woods radioed confirmation 2 figures dressed in black, no headlights moving deliberately. I didn't have to ask who. Julian entered first. He moved through the garden like he used to as a boy, same steps, same path, but this time he wasn't chasing frogs or pretending to be an explorer. He was hunting. Melissa Duval followed closely behind carrying a black canvas bag. She was methodical, efficient. Her hair was tied back tightly, her movements rehearsed like choreography. She knew this house. She knew where the cameras had once been, but she didn't know the new ones. They bypassed the front entirely and went straight to the side library window, one Robert had left unlatched every spring for ventilation. I never fixed it. They slipped inside. I remained in the study wearing a thick wool robe over my nightclothes and a wire beneath that. My hands were steady, my breath measured, my heart. Not so much. I heard them long before I saw them, soft footfalls over Persian rugs, whispers slicing through the dark. "Check the safe," Melissa whispered. "I already did last time. Nothing inside but ledgers. Then it's in the desk, or with her. She's not stupid. They moved through the house like they owned it. They didn't. And when they reached the study, I was already sitting in the same wingback chair where Julian once begged me for $100,000. Funny how history likes to rhyme before it roars. Julian paused in the doorway. He looked older, not physically, but spiritually. Like all the masks he'd ever worn had finally peeled off, and what was left was a hollow man who'd run out of people to fool. "Mom," he said quietly, stepping into the light. "We need the evidence." I tilted my head. "What evidence?" He didn't answer. Melissa stepped forward. She held the syringe now half hidden in her palm. Her smile had evaporated. Only the predator remained. "You told the press you had it," she said. "We can't take that risk." And then she moved forward. But I didn't flinch, because I knew what came next. FBI. Hands where I can see them. The room exploded. Agents swarmed from every door, flashlights cutting through shadows like blades. Red lasers marked chests. Commands echoed. Julian froze, hands above his head. Melissa turned, tried to run, then lunged at me with the syringe. She didn't make it far. 2 agents tackled her mid-stride. The syringe clattered across the marble floor, skidding until it tapped the leg of Robert's favorite armchair. It was over in seconds. I didn't move, didn't cry. Just watched as the people I once welcomed into my home were hauled out in handcuffs. Melissa screamed threats. Julian stared at the ground like it might open up and swallow him whole. Outside, the sun had started to rise. Light crept across the ashwood porch slowly, like it wasn't sure it was welcome anymore. The agents collected evidence: the syringe, Melissa's bag, the lockpicks, and later the items from the safe they never got to the revised, the foundation deed, the backup hard drive. But the most damning piece came from my own chest: the wire. Melissa's voice clear and unmistakable, saying, "Then we can't take any chances." Julian's silence sealing it. That morning, I stood by the window as the agents drove them away, red and blue lights bouncing off the white columns of the house like some ironic kind of justice. It should have felt like triumph. It didn't, because some victories come at the cost of everything you once believed was true. I had won the game, but I had lost the player I loved most, my son. The courtroom was colder than the hospital, sterile, polished, impersonal, and yet far more intimate. I sat in the front row, hands folded in my lap, watching my only son sit behind the defendant's table, dressed in a gray suit that no longer fit right. He looked smaller in that suit, like the fabric refused to pretend anymore. Melissa, no Melissa Duval, sat beside him, guarded by 2 U.S. Marshals. Her hair was slicked back, her expression was unreadable. Only her eyes gave her away, cold, flat, like she'd already moved on to her next scheme in her mind. They had tried to kill me, tried to erase me, tried to rewrite my life into a headline that read, "Wealthy Widow Snaps," but they failed. And now the world would hear the truth from my lips, not theirs. The prosecutor, a young man named Oliver Radcliffe, laid it all out in opening statements: the cyanide, the planted note, the surveillance footage, the forged handwriting, the wire, and the motive: $84 million in mineral rights assets property, and a will recently updated to exclude the very people who wanted me dead. Melissa had underestimated me. Julian had abandoned me. I testified for 2 hours, calm, controlled. The courtroom leaned in as I explained the smell of the coffee, the almond note, the split-second decision to switch cups, the way Melissa watched me drink, the way Julian didn't. I told them about the foundation, the new will, the motive they thought they had buried. Melissa's attorney tried to rattle me, said maybe I was confused, that maybe the trauma of losing my husband living alone had fractured my grip on reality. I smiled at him. Cold. "Son," I said, "I've cross-examined organized crime bosses. You'll have to try harder." The jury believed me. How could they not? Melissa's prints were on the syringe. Her voice was on the recording. Her aliases traced through 3 states. The Arizona death re-examined and reopened confirmed everything. The toxicology matched. She had a pattern. She was a killer. Melissa Duval was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms, attempted murder conspiracy to commit murder identity fraud and interstate fraud. She never looked at me again. Julian took a plea. His lawyer negotiated down to 25 years in federal prison in exchange for cooperation and testimony. He admitted to conspiring with Melissa, to accessing my estate, to attempting to interfere with my will. He never admitted to knowing about the cyanide, but the silence the day I nearly died, the way he didn't stop her, didn't flinch, didn't speak, that said enough. I was in the courtroom when they led him away. He turned eyes searching mine for something regret, forgiveness, memory. He got nothing. No words, no tears, not even a nod. Just the cold, unwavering gaze of the woman he once called Mom. And that's how we ended. Julian Mercer, my only son, walked himself out of the family legacy and into federal custody. The press swarmed for weeks. Headlines flipped. Mother outwits would-be murderers. Widow turns tables in stunning FBI sting. Reporters called. Podcast hosts emailed. Publishers offered checks with 6 zeros. A film studio pitched a limited series. I declined them all. Some stories aren't meant to be sold. Some pain isn't for their entertainment. Instead, I turned to what mattered. The Mercer Foundation became real. The land that once whispered wealth was now committed legally, irrevocably, to serving those who were forgotten seniors, without advocates, children without access, animals without shelter. Ashwood stayed in my name, but not as an inheritance. No family name would ever take it again. The staff returned people I trusted. The gardens were replanted. The air got lighter. Sometimes I walked the western trail just before dusk. I can still hear Robert in the trees, see Julian as a boy chasing fireflies with a mason jar laughing into the dark. But I don't ache anymore, because grief and betrayal are heavy. But clarity sets you free. Ashwood is quiet now, not empty, but peaceful. The kind of stillness that doesn't haunt but heals, the kind that says you survived. Some mornings I still walk the halls barefoot just to feel the stone floor beneath my feet, just to remind myself I'm still here. The Mercer Foundation runs itself now. Scholarships have already gone out to 4 students. One is studying biomedical ethics, another veterinary law. I smile every time I read their essays. They write like they still believe in things. Like justice and kindness are currencies that haven't been devalued. They remind me of who I was once. I kept one item from the trial, just one, the coffee cup, the identical white porcelain mug with the gold rim, the one that held Melissa's sip of cyanide. I had it cleaned, sterilized, sealed in a glass box. It now sits quietly on the mantel of Robert's study right next to a framed copy of the Mercer Foundation's charter. I don't keep it out of vengeance. I keep it because symbols matter. That cup was supposed to end me. Instead, it marked my rebirth. People sometimes ask, quietly, gently, why I never visited Julian in prison. I have no answer for them, not because I don't know, but because the answer doesn't belong to them. It belongs to me, and it's simple. When someone hands you your death and watches in silence as you drink, even if they once called you mother, they are no longer your son. They are just another lesson, a hard one, a final one. I haven't changed the locks at Ashwood. I haven't replaced the roses Julian trampled coming in that night. I haven't repainted the study. I've left the evidence untouched, because this home, this legacy, this life, it was built not on perfection but on survival. And survival, I've learned, isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes survival is just breath, stillness, a locked will, a quiet cup of coffee that never reaches your lips. I sip tea now, only tea, and I make it myself. The staff knows. The foundation board knows. Even the press, they still send requests wanting interviews, dramatizations, documentaries. I don't respond because justice doesn't need retelling. It needs protecting. One life at a time, one woman at a time, one legacy at a time. So if you've made it this far, if you're sitting in silence, questioning the people who were supposed to love you, wondering if the way they treat you is what family is supposed to feel like, let me tell you something. I wish someone had told me, love doesn't ask you to die quietly. It doesn't watch you suffer and sip poison while it stays silent. It doesn't ask for forgiveness before it asks for the truth. If someone you love has made you feel like your instincts are wrong, your mind unreliable, your story unbelievable, don't wait for proof. You are the proof. And that is enough. Have you ever felt betrayed by the very people you were supposed to trust most? Share your story in the comments. Let someone else know they're not alone. And if this story moved, you subscribe to The Art of Revenge. Here we don't just survive betrayal, we reclaim power one story at a time.